Long ago, in a kingdom where the sun always kissed the hills, there lived a girl named Adana. Adana was a maid in the house of a very wealthy and cruel merchant. She was not a maid because she was lazy, but because she had lost her parents when she was very small. Every day, Adana woke up before the birds started to sing. She scrubbed the cold stone floors until her hands were red and sore. She washed heavy blankets in the freezing river and carried pots of water that made her back ache. While the merchant's own daughters wore silk and ate honey cakes, Adana wore rags and ate the crusts of bread left behind. But Adana had a secret. In her small, dark room under the stairs, she had a tiny broken mirror. It was the only thing she had from her mother. Whenever she was very sad, she would look into that mirror and hum a soft tune. She never danced in the streets like the other girls, and she never went to the village square to play. She was the poor maid who never danced, and most people forgot she even existed. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my folktale story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Adana's life was very hard, but she never complained. The merchant had 3 daughters named Chika, Ife, and Zola. These 3 sisters were very mean. They saw how beautiful Adana was, even in her dirty rags, and it made them very angry. They would throw dirt on the floor just after Adana had cleaned it. They would pull her hair and call her names like Charcoal Girl or Dust Maid. One morning, the merchant came into the kitchen with a very big smile. He held a letter with a gold seal on it. He told his daughters that the king was looking for a bride. The king was young, handsome, and very kind, but he was lonely in his big palace. To find his queen, the king decided to hold a grand ball that would last for 7 days and 7 nights. Every girl in the land was invited to come and dance. The merchant's daughters screamed with joy. They began to order expensive fabrics and sparkling jewels. Adana stood in the corner, holding a dirty broom. She looked at the gold seal and felt a tiny spark of hope in her heart. She wanted to see the palace too. She wanted to feel the music in her feet. But she knew she had nothing to wear but her old, torn rags. The merchant's daughter spent the next week being even meaner to Adana. "Wash my silk dress, Dust Maid," Chika shouted. "Polished my gold shoes until I can see my face," Ife yelled. Adana worked until her fingers bled. She did everything they asked without a word. On the first night of the ball, the sisters looked like bright birds in their fine clothes. They sprayed expensive perfume and laughed at Adana as they walked toward their carriage. "You stay here and clean the soot from the chimneys," Zola said with a cruel laugh. "A girl like you would only bring bad luck to the king's palace." Adana watched the carriage disappear down the dusty road. She sat on the kitchen floor and began to cry. She felt very alone. She went to her small room and took out her mother's broken mirror. As her tears fell onto the glass, something strange happened. The mirror began to glow with a soft, blue light. It felt warm in her hands. Adana stopped crying and stared at the reflection. She did not see her tired face. Instead, she saw a garden full of white flowers that glowed in the dark. She heard a voice like a soft wind whispering her name. Adana, the heart that is pure is the heart that should dance. Adana gasped and dropped the mirror on her straw bed. Adana was very afraid, but the light from the mirror did not go away. It filled her small room with the smell of jasmine and rain. Slowly, she picked up the mirror again. The reflection showed a beautiful dress made of moonlight and silver thread. Beside the dress were two shoes made of clear glass that looked like morning dew. Adana rubbed her eyes. She thought she was dreaming because she was so tired. Suddenly, the light jumped out of the mirror and touched her rags. In a flash, her dirty clothes turned into the silver dress she had seen in the glass. Her messy hair was braided with tiny pearls that shone like stars. On her feet were the glass shoes. Adana felt light, as if she could fly. The voice whispered again, "Go to the palace, Adana. But remember, you must not dance for the crowd. You must only dance where the king can see your soul." Adana did not understand what that meant, but she felt a strange courage. She stepped out of the house. A white horse was waiting for her at the gate. It had a saddle of soft leather and a mane as white as milk. Adana climbed onto the horse, and it began to run faster than the wind toward the king's palace. She was no longer a maid. She was a vision of light. When Adana arrived at the palace, the music was so loud it made the ground shake. Thousands of lanterns hung from the trees, and the air was filled with the smell of roasted meat and sweet wine. Adana felt shy. She saw the merchants' daughters dancing wildly in the center of the room, trying to get the king's attention. The king sat on his high throne, looking very bored. He saw many girls in beautiful dresses, but they all looked the same to him. They all wanted his gold and his crown. Adana did not go into the middle of the ballroom. She remembered the words from the mirror. She found a quiet hallway that had a very large, polished silver mirror on the wall. The hallway was empty and dark. Adana began to move. She didn't dance like the others. She danced the way she felt when she watched the birds fly. She danced like the wind blowing through the tall grass. She was graceful and silent. She didn't know that the king had grown tired of the noise and had walked away from the throne. He was walking down that very hallway. He stopped when he saw a flash of silver. He looked at the large mirror on the wall and saw the reflection of a girl dancing. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his entire life. The king stood perfectly still. He did not want to move and scare the girl away. He watched her reflection in the mirror for a long time. To him, she looked like a spirit of the moon. Her movements told a story of sadness, hope, and great kindness. He could see that she was not dancing to be seen by others. She was dancing for her own heart. But as soon as the king took one step forward, the music in the ballroom stopped. It was midnight. Adana heard the silence and panicked. She remembered she had to be home before the merchant returned. She turned and ran down the hallway, away from the king. The king shouted for her to wait, but she was too fast. As she ran down the palace stairs, one of her glass shoes slipped off her foot. She did not stop to pick it up. She jumped onto her white horse and disappeared into the dark forest. The king ran to the stairs and picked up the tiny glass shoe. It was warm and felt like it was made of magic. He looked into the dark night, but the girl was gone. He looked at his guards and said, "Find the girl who owns this shoe. She is the only one who truly knows how to dance. She is my queen." The next morning, the whole kingdom was talking about the mysterious girl in the silver dress. The merchant's daughters were very angry. She was probably a witch. Chika screamed. Adana was back in her rags, scrubbing the soot from the fireplace. Her heart was beating fast as she listened to them talk. She had hidden the other glass shoe under her straw mattress. She felt like she was living two lives. The king's soldiers began to visit every house in the village. They carried the glass shoe on a purple velvet pillow. They told every girl to try it on. If the shoe fit, she would be taken to the palace to meet the king. The merchant's daughters spent hours rubbing oil on their feet to make them smaller. They even tried to wrap their toes in bandages. When the soldiers arrived at the merchant's house, the sisters pushed Adana into the cellar and locked the door. "You stay down there, dust maid," Ife hissed. "The king would never want to see a dirty girl like you." Adana sat in the dark cellar, holding her mother's mirror. The mirror was dim now, but she could still feel a tiny bit of warmth. She waited and listened to the sisters screaming as they tried to force their big feet into the tiny glass shoe. The shoe did not fit Chika. It did not fit Ife. It did not fit Zola. The sisters cried and blamed the soldiers, saying the shoe was too small. The lead soldier was about to leave when he heard a soft humming sound coming from under the floorboards. "Who else lives in this house?" the soldier asked. The merchant turned pale. "Nobody, sir. Just my daughters and some useless animals." But the soldier was a smart man. He followed the sound to the cellar door. He saw the heavy lock and frowned. "Open this door at once," he commanded. The merchant had no choice. He opened the door, and Adana stepped out. She was covered in dust and ash, and her hair was messy. The merchant's daughters laughed loudly. "You want her to try the shoe? She is just a maid," Zola mocked. But the soldier did not laugh. He knelt down and held out the glass shoe. Adana sat on a wooden stool and slid her foot into the shoe. It fit perfectly. In fact, it began to glow just like the mirror. The merchant and his daughters gasped in shock. Adana reached into her pocket and pulled out the second glass shoe. As soon as she put it on, her rags transformed back into the beautiful silver dress. The soldiers bowed low. "The king is waiting for you," they said. Adana was taken to the palace in a golden carriage. When she entered the throne room, the king stood up immediately. He recognized her eyes. They were the same eyes he had seen in the reflection of the mirror. "You are the one who danced in the shadows," the king said softly. He took her hand and led her to the garden. He told her that he did not care that she was a maid. He cared about the goodness he saw in her soul. Adana told him her story. She told him about her mother's mirror and how she had worked so hard for the mean merchant. The king was very angry at how she had been treated, but Adana asked him to be merciful. "Kindness is stronger than anger," she told him. The king was amazed by her wisdom. He realized that she was not just a beautiful dancer, but a girl with a heart of gold. He asked Adana to marry him, and she said yes. But the story does not end there. A great mystery was about to unfold. On the night before the wedding, the broken mirror in Adana's room began to speak again. This time, it told her that her parents were not actually dead. They had been taken by a wicked sorcerer who lived in the mountains of mist. Adana was shocked. She showed the mirror to the king. The king was a brave man, and he promised to help her find her family. "We cannot have a wedding while your heart is heavy with sadness," he said. They gathered a small group of the bravest soldiers and began a long journey to the mountains of mist. The path was dangerous. There were deep canyons and thick forests where the trees seemed to move. Adana carried the mirror with her. It acted as a compass, glowing brighter whenever they were heading in the right direction. One night, while they were camping by a river, the sorcerer appeared in a cloud of black smoke. He was tall and had eyes like cold stones. "Why do you come to my mountains?" he hissed. The maid should have stayed in her kitchen. He waved his hand, and a wall of ice rose up between Adana and the king. The soldiers tried to break the ice with their swords, but it was too strong. The sorcerer laughed and grabbed Adana. "Your mother's mirror belongs to me," he said. He vanished with Adana, leaving the king alone in the cold snow. The king was devastated, but he refused to give up. He knew he had to save his bride and her family. Adana found herself in a tall tower made of black glass. The sorcerer threw her into a room with no windows. In the corner of the room, she saw two old people sitting on the floor. They looked tired and thin. When they saw Adana, they gasped. "Our little Adana," the woman whispered. It was her mother and father. They had been kept as prisoners for many years because the sorcerer wanted their magic mirror. Her mother explained that the mirror was a gift from an ancient spirit. It showed the truth of people's hearts. The sorcerer wanted to use it to see the weaknesses of every king in the world so he could rule them all. But the mirror would only work for someone with a pure heart. That is why it had stayed broken and silent for the sorcerer, but worked for Adana. The sorcerer came back into the room. "Give me the mirror, girl, and I will let your parents go," he lied. Adana looked at the mirror. She knew the sorcerer was evil. If she gave him the mirror, the whole world would be in danger. But if she didn't, her parents might suffer. She closed her eyes and prayed for a way to save everyone. Suddenly, Adana remembered the king's words. He had said that her reflection was the most beautiful thing because it showed her soul. She looked at the sorcerer and said, "I will give you the mirror, but first you must look into it. You must see the power you want to hold." The sorcerer was greedy and fell for her trick. He snatched the mirror from her hand. He held it up to his face, expecting to see a vision of a great empire. But the mirror did not show him a crown. Because the sorcerer's heart was full of hate and shadows, the mirror reflected his own darkness back at him. He saw a monster with sharp teeth and empty eyes. The sight was so terrible that the sorcerer screamed in terror. He tried to throw the mirror away, but it stuck to his hand like glue. The light from the mirror began to burn the darkness away. The black tower started to shake and crumble. At that moment, the king arrived. He had climbed the mountain and fought through the ice wall. He broke down the door of the tower just as the sorcerer vanished into a pile of ash. The magic mirror had defeated the evil by simply showing it the truth. The tower began to fall apart around them. The king grabbed Adana's parents, and Adana grabbed the mirror. They ran down the winding stairs as the black glass shattered like ice. They made it outside just as the entire mountain shook. The sun began to rise over the mountains of mist, and the dark clouds finally cleared. For the first time in many years, Adana's parents felt the warmth of the sun on their faces. They hugged Adana and cried tears of joy. The king stood by, smiling. He was happy to see his bride finally reunited with her family. They returned to the kingdom as heroes. The people cheered when they saw the girl who had been a maid return with her mother and father. The merchant and his daughters were hiding in their house, afraid that Adana would punish them. But when Adana saw them, she did not call the guards. She told them that they were forgiven. "I am a queen now," she said. "And a queen must lead with love, not revenge." The merchant and his daughters were so ashamed of their behavior that they left the kingdom and were never heard from again. The wedding of Adana and the king was the most beautiful event the kingdom had ever seen. There were no mean sisters, no cruel merchants, and no black sorcerers. There were only friends, family, and a lot of music. Adana wore her silver dress, and this time, she didn't hide in the shadows. She danced in the middle of the ballroom with the king. Everyone watched in wonder. They realized that her beauty did not come from her dress or her jewels, but from the kindness she showed to everyone. Adana's parents lived in the palace with them, and they were never hungry or cold again. The magic mirror was placed in a special room where anyone who felt lost could come and look into it. It didn't give them gold, but it showed them the goodness inside their own hearts. Adana became known as the wise queen. She built schools for children who were poor like she had been. She made sure that every maid in the kingdom was treated with respect. She never forgot where she came from. And every year, On the anniversary of the night she first went to the ball, she would put on her glass shoes and dance. Many years passed, and the kingdom grew very peaceful. Adana and the king had a daughter named Amara. Amara was a happy child who loved to hear the story of the poor maid and the glass shoe. But as Amara grew older, a new problem arose in a neighboring land. A great drought had come, and the rivers had dried up. People were hungry and thirsty. Adana knew she had to help. She decided to use the magic mirror to find a hidden source of water. She traveled to the border of the kingdom and held the mirror up to the dry earth. The mirror began to glow with a deep blue light. It showed a reflection of a great underground lake hidden beneath a mountain of stone. Adana told the king, and they sent workers to dig where the mirror pointed. Sure enough, water gushed out, saving thousands of lives. The people of the neighboring land were so grateful that they pledged to be friends with Adana's kingdom forever. This showed Amara that being a queen was not about wearing a crown, but about serving others. Adana taught her daughter that the reflection in the mirror is only as bright as the deeds you do in the world. One day, an old traveler came to the palace. He looked very tired and had holes in his shoes. The guards wanted to turn him away, but Adana saw him from her balcony. She came down and invited him in for a meal. The traveler thanked her and said, "Queen Adana, I have heard of your mirror. May I see it?" Adana led him to the mirror room. The traveler looked into the glass. He didn't see himself. He saw a vision of a distant land where a young boy was crying because he had lost his way. The traveler gasped, "That is my grandson." Adana realized the mirror could see across the world to help those in need. She gave the traveler a map and some gold so he could find the boy. The traveler left with hope in his heart. Adana realized that the mirror's magic was growing. It was no longer just about her. It was a tool for the whole world. She decided to create a group of messengers who would use the mirror's visions to find people who needed help. They were called the Reflections of Mercy. This made the kingdom the most respected land in the world. As Adana grew older, her hair turned the color of the silver dress she once wore. She was still as beautiful as ever because her heart remained pure. One evening, as she sat in the garden with the king, they watched the stars come out. The king took her hand. "Adana, you have changed this kingdom from a place of greed to a place of light," he said. Adana smiled. "It was not me, my king. It was the choice to keep dancing even when the world was dark." She realized that her life had been a long dance. From the kitchen floor to the palace garden, she had moved with grace. She took the small broken mirror from her pocket. It was no longer broken. Over the years, the cracks had healed themselves until the glass was perfectly smooth. She handed it to her daughter, Amara. "Now it is your turn to watch the reflections," she said. Amara took the mirror with tears in her eyes. She promised to follow in her mother's footsteps. That night, Adana fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. She dreamed of her mother and father, and of the white horse that had carried her to her destiny. In her dream, Adana saw the spirit of the mirror. It was a beautiful lady made of light. The lady thanked Adana for using the magic for good. The mirror is a gift for the world, the spirit said. As long as there are people who are kind to others, the light will never fade. Adana woke up feeling very happy. She went to the village the next day to visit the old house where she used to work. The house was now a home for children who had no parents. She sat on the kitchen floor where she used to scrub and told the children stories. She told them that they were all kings and queens in their own way. She told them that their clothes didn't define who they were. The children listened with wide eyes. One little girl asked, "Will I ever find a glass shoe, Queen Adana?" Adana laughed gently. "You don't need a glass shoe to dance, little one. You only need to hear the music in your own heart." She gave the girl a small piece of blue ribbon. The girl hugged it as if it were made of gold. Adana knew that her work was done. The legacy of the poor maid who never danced lived on for hundreds of years. The story was told in every village and every city. It reminded people that even when things are very hard, there is always hope. It taught them that mean people may win for a short time, but kindness wins in the end. The glass shoes were kept in a glass case in the center of the palace for everyone to see. They never gathered dust. They always shone like they were brand new. People from far away came to see them and were inspired to be better versions of themselves. The kingdom remained wealthy, not because of gold, but because the people helped each other. When the harvest was bad in one village, the other villages sent food. When someone was sick, the neighbors looked after them. This was the true magic that Adana had brought to the land. It was a magic that didn't require mirrors or spells. It was the magic of a community that loved one another. Amara became a great queen just like her mother. She married a kind man who was a scholar. Together, they built great libraries where everyone could learn to read. They believed that knowledge was a type of light that could also drive away darkness. The magic mirror stayed in the family. It passed down from generation to generation. Each time a new person held it, the mirror would show them a new lesson. Sometimes it showed the importance of patience. Sometimes it showed the importance of courage. But it always showed the reflection of the soul. The mountains of mist were no longer feared. They became a place where people went to see the beautiful sunrise. The black tower was gone, and in its place grew a forest of white flowers that smelled like jasmine. It was a reminder that even the darkest places can become beautiful if the light is allowed to return. The spirit of Adana seemed to be everywhere, in the wind, in the music, and in the laughter of the children. There were times, of course, when new challenges came. There were kings in other lands who were greedy and wanted to take the mirror for themselves. But every time an army approached, the mirror would create a thick mist that made the soldiers lose their way. They would wander around until they were tired and hungry. Then the people of Adana's kingdom would go out to them, not with swords, but with bread and water. The soldiers were so surprised by this kindness that they would put down their weapons. Many of them decided to stay and live in the land of peace. This was the dance of the shields. It was a way of winning wars without ever fighting. The greedy kings soon realized that they could not defeat a kingdom that used love as its armor. One by one, the other kingdoms began to change their ways too. The whole world started to look a little bit more like Adana's reflection. As centuries passed, the story of Adana became a folktale. Some people thought she was a real person, and some thought she was a legend. But it didn't matter. The truth of the story remained. Every time a young girl felt sad or unappreciated, she would remember the maid who found her magic in a broken mirror. She would remember that her value was not in her rags. In schools, teachers taught children how to look in the mirror. They didn't mean look at their faces. They meant look at their actions. Are you being kind? They would ask. Are you helping your friends? This became the foundation of the kingdom's laws. The Emira law was simple: treat everyone as if you are seeing the best version of them in a magic glass. It made the world a very gentle place to live. And that is the most important thing a story can do. It can change how we see the world and how we treat the people in it. The white horse that carried Adana to the palace was also remembered. It became a symbol of speed and purity. In many paintings, Adana is shown riding the horse with the silver dress flowing behind her like a cloud. The horse was said to be a guardian spirit that appeared whenever someone was in great danger and had a pure heart. Whether it was a real horse or a spirit, it represented the help that comes to us when we least expect it. It reminds us to keep our eyes open for the white horses in our own lives, the friends, teachers, or strangers who help us reach our dreams. Adana's life showed that we are never truly alone. When we do good, the universe finds a way to support us. The reflection in the mirror was not just Adana's soul, it was a reflection of the goodness that exists in everything. Tonight, as the moon rises, think about the story of Adana. Think about her scrubbing the floors while her heart was singing. Think about the courage it took for her to dance in a hallway when no one was watching. We all have moments when we feel like a maid in rags. We all have moments when people are mean to us or don't see our worth. But remember, you have a mirror inside you too. It is the part of you that knows you are special. It is the part of you that wants to be kind. Don't wait for a king to notice you. Start dancing now. Dance with your kindness, dance with your hard work, and dance with your dreams. The world is a very big ballroom, and there is plenty of room for everyone to shine. Just like Adana, your light can heal cracks and turn darkness into dawn. The story you have just heard is a beautiful African tale I heard long ago. I'm telling you to wake your minds to the power of inner beauty and the strength of a kind heart. Adana's journey shows us that our circumstances do not define our destiny, but our character does. If you were the protagonist, what would you do? Would you have forgiven the merchant and his daughters, or would you have used your new power to punish them? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light the path for someone else. When we share our thoughts on these lessons, we keep the magic of the folktale alive. May you always find the strength to dance, even when you are wearing rags, and may your reflection always be one of peace and love. Thank you for listening to the story of the maid who became a queen through the magic of her own soul.